Hey, Jill.
Hey, Thomas, how are you?
Good. Sorry I missed your call earlier. I've been
No,
like
no,
wrapped
that's
up in
totally
meetings and
okay.
stuff all day.
We really, we're trying to get a Born on the Battlefield PowerPoint that employees can use, and they don't have
Okay.
access to it. So if you could send it to Stephanie Willett, that would be lovely. First and
Okay.
second module, the whole class. Stephanie Willett, Willet.
Okay.
And send a copy
And
to me, and then I can forward it to all the other folk. That would be lovely.
okay.
She doesn't
All
have
right.
permission, so when she
I
tries
see.
to get in, she can't get it because she's an employee and not
Okay.
a volunteer. So, how are you? How's
I'm
your
good.
baby?
She's great. Yeah. Yeah, she's doing really well. She's a happy, smiley baby, which is about all you can ask for. And she
Oh, it's
sleeps well.
wonderful.
She sleeps really
Wonderful,
well.
wonderful. Well, we may be teaching a humanity and war class
Oh,
in
great.
one locally with Liz and Larry, and
Okay.
then one with UCSC in Santa Cruz,
Great.
the University of California in Santa Cruz, in their political and their international law class,
That's
which will be
fantastic.
really fun. Yeah, and we're going to try and get Christian to come and be one of the teachers.
Yeah, that would be
We don't know
great.
if that happened. Yeah, but we're working on it. Yeah.
That'd be great. That's awesome. Well, so for the order of things today, how do you anticipate things
What I'd
sort of
love to
sequencing?
do is what I'd love to do is have Karina speak first
Yep.
on the stateless, and then you talk about the interaction of the stateless. There she is. Hi, Karina. Can you hear me? Like we can't hear you. You're on mute. Oh, there you are.
Yeah, I'm here.
We're gonna,
Hey.
Karina. I'm talking about
Hi.
the progression of things today. You'll be first and talk about the stateless, and then Thomas, who's uh, from national headquarters, who's the director of international humanitarian law, will talk about the intertwining of the stateless and how they protect. And then, and what most people don't know that I always do, and how they support, what I always do is I invite you to talk about what you thought you were going to be in high school. So that's my first question to you, Karina. What did you think you were going to be when you were in high school? Like I thought, this is me being crazy. I thought I was going to be an airline stewardess. That's what I thought. I had no idea what my path would take me. But in any case, and then I'll ask the same thing of Thomas, and then I'll ask him to respond and talk about IHL in the context of forced migration and stateless. Does that make sense? And then we do have you each talk 20 minutes to 30 minutes. And then after that, what ends up happening is we open it up to questions and discussion. So you have about 40 minutes of the two of you talking, 20 each. And then we have about 45 minutes of discussion and questions. And then if you think of anything that you want to send, like I love the documentary that you sent me. If you have anything that you would like the participants to be able to um, to be able to review, other than we're going to record you, other than the recording, like if you've thought of a video or a book that might be useful, you send it to me and I will have a follow-up letter following next week with the YouTube of the two of you speaking, and I'll send that both to you, and then also any resources that you want to give to the participants other than what you gave today. Does that make sense? Any
Yeah, it's
questions
perfect.
so far? You have 146 people signed up for this, which means not all of them will show up because they have conflicting meetings, but they sign up and register so that they can get sent the YouTube. And then we send out the part to every participant, every person registered, we send out the follow-up email with the YouTube of your recording. So do you have any questions? And did you know that, have you met Thomas yet? Did you get to meet
No,
him?
no. Hi,
Thomas is
Thomas.
really exciting. The most exciting thing I can tell you about him right now is he just had a baby girl.
That is very exciting. Tiresome, but
Sure.
exciting. It's nice to meet you.
Nice to
Yeah,
meet you.
and Karina has worked with me. She came and spoke a few years back, and I'm so excited that she's coming back to talk with us. And also, somebody just came on, Deanna Wilbur, and there be people that come on early. I always have them unmute and show their faces so you're not talking to initials. Deanna, there you are. Hi. You want to tell us where you're from?
Spokane, Washington.
Wonderful. And what do you do?
I am service to the armed forces as well as mass care.
Wonderful. Thank you for
Welcome.
being here today. I'm so glad you're here. Yeah. What we'll have you do all at the beginning is we'll mute you all and take you off camera. But right now you're very welcome to stay on camera so that they can actually see a person that they're going to be talking to and not the little initials on the screen. I just feel that's really important. And then I thought, Thomas and Karina, if you had any questions you wanted to ask each other before the talk, this is the time that you can now do that. And I know you have slides. Is that correct, Thomas?
I don't, not today.
Oh, and how about you, Karina?
Yes, I do.
Wonderful. And you know how to use them and put them on Teams and everything?
Yeah. Yeah.
Good. So, okay, then I won't worry about technical support. And I think somebody's going to record it. Hopefully, Thomas, can you record? Do you know how to
Sure.
record?
I do.
If you could record the meeting, I'm hoping that you're one of the hosts and that you're allowed to do that. And if not, I think I have a tech person that's coming on to record you.
It looks like it's already recording.
Oh, it is. Oh,
Yep.
wonderful.
Automatically, it says.
Oh, that's good. I didn't know that happened.
Great. Yeah.
Because Deanna, in case you wanted to know, we're recording so that you'll get next week, you'll get a recording on YouTube of the talk. So you'll be able to listen to it again. Or and then we'll send up follow-up resources as well.
Karina, where in the world are you?
I'm in Asbury Park, New Jersey.
Oh, okay. What part of Jersey is that in?
It's on the coast and in the middle of the state. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm in Allentown, Pennsylvania, about 30 minutes from the Jersey
Oh,
border.
yeah. Yeah, I'm familiar. My husband and I moved here after 17 years in Philly.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. Really cute.
I'm not brave enough to venture down that way too often. The traffic is, if you could parachute me in, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it gets after 17 years, it just got too much for us.
Oh,
We're like small
you're
town.
brave to stay that long.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, I don't know, it's this weird place. Maybe I've been to like 3 or 4 that are like this, where it does not matter. There's no rhyme or reason. There's no time of day, like predictability to the traffic. It's just always there. It's just, it's like an organ around the city. So,
yeah.
well, that's really cool.
You have a current picture of your photo of your baby?
I do. Let's see here.
Would love to see it.
That's all my phone is. My phone is mostly a photo library that happens to make calls and text
I have
messages.
1,000 photos of your daughter. I know.
I'm okay with that. Let's see here. See if I can send it in here.
Do you have any children, Karina?
No, my husband and I are child free. But we have a lot of children in our lives that we love.
I can imagine.
That's the way to keep it. Yeah.
That's the way to love it. Yeah. We do.
Yeah. I've got, I have 3 and I'll make you a really good deal on one of them. If maybe 2, we'll do a package deal. Depends on their mood and like how they're acting as to the discount.
How fun. Yeah, no, in September, I just had the young man that I helped raise from the time he was 18 months to 6 years, just had a baby girl named Seychelle Fern. So I'm like the
That's
proud
a pretty name.
auntie grandmother,
Oh,
so
that's
fun.
amazing.
He sent me a picture of the baby after 3 days, and the 2 of them all in the bed with the dog and the cat and the baby. And they looked like they were so tired, like they could barely breathe. Yeah.
I feel that deep in my bones. All right, let's see.
Is there any particular way you want to be introduced?
No, not really. My talk is going to be probably like 20 minutes. Just to
Okay.
leave more time for this like questions and.
Same.
Sure. That sounds good. Lori, would you unmute yourself and introduce yourself and show your photo, even if it's for 30 seconds, so that the speakers will be able to see something other than an initial?
Hi.
Lori? Yeah.
My name is Lori Perez. So I have my hair down. It's been a
Oh,
long
good.
day of phone calls today.
You
There
want
we
to
go.
show your face?
There we go. Is it? There we are.
There you
Hi.
are. Hey, where
My
are you
name is.
from?
I'm Lori Perez. I'm a senior volunteer recruiter with the Virginia region here at Richmond.
Wonderful. Welcome. And how about you, Clay? Where are you from?
I'm Clay Cougar. I'm Los Gatos, California.
Fantastic. You're in my way. You're half an hour away from me. I live in Santa Cruz. Wonderful. And Chase Monroe, would you be willing to unmute and tell us where you're from and show your photo so that they see something other than initials? Chase?
Hey
Are
there.
you there?
Yeah, I'm Chase. I am. Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah. Can we see you?
Well, I'm driving at the moment,
Oh, okay.
but I'm from the Alabama, Mississippi region.
Wonderful. Welcome. And what do you do?
I am the new regional SAFIS director.
Wonderful. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We're just waiting for other people to show up, and this is the time where you can introduce yourselves to the speakers so they don't have to talk to initials all the time, and they actually have faces. So I'm sorry I don't get to see you, but we have a photo of you with sunglasses on, no less. You must live in a very sunny place.
I do. I live in Pensacola, Florida.
Wow. And you, Clay, are sunglassed too. Is it sunny where you are in Los Gatos? We can't hear you. You're on mute, I think. You're on mute, Clay.
Yeah.
There you go.
So yeah, I mean the sun's actually come out.
Ours just came out. Yeah, I live by the yacht harbor. Yeah. I usually start about 5 after, so if you need a bathroom break or you need to grab some food, we have 2 minutes till 2 o'clock, but then I usually start about 3 or 4 because people go from one meeting to another. And Roberta, hi, would you unmute yourself and say hi? Roberta, are you there?
Yes,
Wonderful. Can you show
Can
your
you-
face so that Thomas and Karina can see you? There you go.
Yeah, here I am in my kitchen fixing dinner from the Eastern Shore of Maryland. And now
From
I'm
Maryland. And tell them what you do because lots of people don't know.
I am the ISUS lead for the Central Atlantic Division, a partner to the IHL team, and a volunteer partner for the Vice President Service to the Armed Forces and a few other things.
Fun. Thank you
Okay.
so much for being on.
And getting
Yeah.
ready to cook dinner.
And Randall, would you unmute yourself and show your face and introduce yourself to the speakers?
My name's
There you
Randy. My name's Randy Warburton. I'm in the Montana area. I'm an outreach team member and casework volunteer for the Restoring Family Links program.
Thank you for that. Me too. I love Restoring Family Links. Rhonda, would you be willing to unmute yourself and show your face? And share with us what part of the country you're from. Rhonda, you're on. Yeah, there
Hi.
you go. Can you
Yeah,
show your
so
face even for 30 seconds so they don't just see initials?
I'm sorry, I can't. I'm a little bit of a mess right now. Sorry.
That's okay. You should see me. I look like BP Longstockings right now.
I have a face mask on right now.
Tell me a little bit about what you do.
So my name is Rhonda Gomez, and I am from the Greater New York area. I am a Restoring Family Links caseworker. I also do SAF for the Greater New York area, and I do home fire education as well as, yeah, I think that's about it, and staff services as well for the Red Cross.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for introducing yourself. And Simone, would you unmute yourself and tell us where you're from and show your face if you would?
Sure.
Thank
Hi,
you.
I'm Simone Kaiser. I'm a philanthropy officer in the Cascades region and a volunteer.
Wonderful. Thank you. And Elizabeth, would you be willing to unmute yourself and show your face? Thank you so much. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
What?
Show your face and share where you're from and what you do.
Oh, I'm not going to show my face because I'm not presentable.
Oh,
But-
we love you. Don't worry about that.
Yeah.
Even if it's for 30 seconds, but I understand if you're not feeling that way.
Yeah, I'm not. So I'm from Ohio, the Cleveland, Ohio
Oh,
area.
wonderful. Yeah. And what do you do?
I'm on the device refresh team
Wonderful.
for the Red Cross as a volunteer.
Thank you. And then I think it's, is it Veronica or Veronique? Would you unmute yourself and introduce yourself?
Hi, Jill. I think we met in 2019 at the International Services Boot Camp. I'm over on the fundraising team in Northern California.
Wonderful. Would you show your face just for a second? Because the speakers always like not to talk to letters. You can unmute. There you go. Thank you so much. Is anybody else want to unmute themselves and introduce themselves to Thomas and Karina? Nick Park, would you be willing to do that?
Yeah, sure.
Great.
Hi, yeah, my name is Nick. I'm a volunteer up in Kotzebue, Alaska right now. Typically I work for U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, but we're shut down right now, so got the chance to come and join this meeting instead of being at work.
I'm so glad. Thanks so much, Nick, for being here. And Laura Peak just put in the chat that she's here. Laura, it's great to see you again. Hello, hello. And what did you put in the chat? Let me see if I can read it. Name is Laura Peak from San Jose office and a 12-year volunteer. Wonderful. Thank you. Anybody else want to introduce themselves and take themselves off mute to introduce themselves to the speakers? Margot, do you want to unmute yourself and show your face and introduce yourself to the speakers? Margot Hillman? Margot's visiting from a train en route to visiting her sister, so she can't be on to be seen. And then there's Cindy from Santa Cruz. Cindy, can you show your face and tell us what you do in Santa Cruz?
Hi, I am a volunteer in Santa Cruz, and I can't show my face right now because of some other issues, but I'm happy to join you all.
And what do you do?
Red Cross Disaster Recovery.
Wonderful, thank you. Anybody else want to share? We're going to start in just 1 minute. Elizabeth Cropel from Newburgh Heights, Ohio. She's a volunteer for the American Red Cross on Device Refresh team. Thank you, Elizabeth. And I have no idea what Device Refresh team is. Isn't that wild? Okay. I'm really excited all of you are here. You're from all over the world. No, I should say all over the United States, not all over the world necessarily. Like Margot's from Pennsylvania and lives in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. She's the International Services Lead there. I want to thank you all for being here. We're going to start the talk right now. And some of you have put in the chat where you're from. I appreciate that so much. I am so excited because a year or two back, Karina came and spoke about the stateless. And most people, when they say stateless, does that mean you haven't decided what state you want to live in the United States? And I go, no, that's not what stateless is about. She has had a lot of experience because she herself came into the United States as stateless and having not having a country. And she'll explain more what that's all about. She's a wonderful speaker and a wonderful human being, and I'm so glad that she's coming back. And I know I've left a whole bunch out. What have I left out? Anything, Karina, you want to add to that?
A lot, but thank you so much. Should I just get started?
No, I was going to introduce Thomas too, and then
Oh,
I'd love
sorry.
you to get
I'm
started.
sorry. I'm
No, but
jumping
if
the
you
gun.
think of anything you want to add, feel free to
No, that's
do that.
great. That's great.
Okay. This is Thomas Harper, who's the Director of International Services, International Humanitarian Law at National Headquarters, is wonderful. He himself has worked both in military and non-military experiences with IHL. And I don't know, you're not a JAG, are you?
Yes,
go
I
ahead,
still
Thomas.
am. Yep.
You still are a JAG. Okay, because for me, that's another acronym that I always get lost in. But I always tell him this claim to fame this month is that he just had a baby. And that's for me so exciting. So I get pictures from time to time, which is for me always a joyful thing to balance off with the turmoil that we're having in the United States. And he's going to talk about the framework of international humanitarian law and its interface with the stateless and what the protection of international humanitarian law does. Karina, did I miss something that you want to say before I ask you your first burning question?
No, that was great. Thank you.
Okay. The first question I'm going to ask you, which I ask every speaker, nobody is immune, except one time speakers introduced themselves asking that question. Tell me a little bit about what you thought you were going to be in high school.
I wanted to be an attorney in high school.
And what made you decide that?
Because I felt compelled of equal representation, and I felt a lot of attachment to ensuring access to rights to people. And I think it kind of came full circle in what I do now.
When you graduated, what did you end up doing?
Well, I didn't graduate college. I couldn't because of my statelessness and lack of identity, which I'll get into in my presentation. But I started to kind of survive in the 2008 market crash. I worked a lot in food industry, and I did a lot of work in volunteering in my community at the time in Philadelphia. And I kind of, from my own personal experience and my lived experience, was able to start United Stateless through that.
Wonderful. Go for it. You have your story now. Go. Please go. Yeah. Please start sharing whatever you want to do.
Okay. Well, I'm going to share my screen, if that's okay with everybody. I think everyone can see now. Awesome.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. My name is Karina Ambartsoumian-Clough. I am based in Asbury Park, New Jersey. I did spend a good majority of my young adult and mid years in Philadelphia, which I called home for a long time. But I'm here to kind of talk about what is statelessness, and I will touch upon international human rights, but really that is not my expertise. I am someone that is familiar with some of these concepts just through the way I've lived my life. I'm really grateful for the chance to talk about something that is so deeply personal, but often invisible: statelessness. When we think about international humanitarian protection, we think of protection, or international humanitarian law, we think of protection. But what happens when the person has no flag, no country, and no state to protect them? And what does that even mean? I lived a long time in since childhood, waking up every day, knowing there's no country that would recognize me. No passport, no nationality, no place that says you're a citizen of, you belong here. And that has been my reality since childhood. I am of Armenian and Ukrainian ethnicity. I was born in the Soviet Union towards the end in 1988, when the Soviet Union experienced a lot of economic disruptions between the influx of capitalism, which didn't exist there before, and it kind of like tanked the ruble or the Soviet dollar, and then also cultural like explosion of jeans and TVs and different types of cars in the Soviet models. But something else happened too, and that was a return of people returning to their roots, shedding Russification, or the Soviet motto of unify under one culture or one Russian umbrella. And there was this return to, in Ukraine, where I was born, there was a sense of returning to Soviet Ukraine, where I was born, there was a sense of returning to the language, which is different than Russian, to shedding your name back to the origins, towards healing. It was a beautiful moment, but the underbelly of that also created xenophobia towards people that did not share that monocultural ethnic background. And unfortunately, my family became a target of that, being mixed ethnic of two different ethnicities. It just became very difficult for my parents to coexist, and especially when I was born. And towards the end of the Soviet Union in 1988, early 90s rather, my parents left to seek asylum, which is a protection in international law, but also it's a protection in United States immigration law. There's opportunities for people to apply for asylum. And that system is very complex. It's one out of many protections under the the INA, or Immigration Nationalities Act. But what it also means is that you're defensively presenting your story in front of a court, and you have a judge that holds all the cards, and they're the ones that decide yes or no. And oftentimes in asylum proceedings, you can look up the judge's approval or denial rate. And unfortunately, our case had a bunch of different unfortunate circumstances, and we were given a denial when I was about 13 years old. And once you're denied asylum, you're automatically placed on removal proceedings to be deported. And unfortunately, I learned then, when I was 13, asking the Ukrainian embassy for my travel documents, that one, I never had travel documents from the Soviet Union because they didn't give travel documents to anyone under the age of 16. But also, the independence of Ukraine doesn't recognize me as their citizen. Even though I was born in their territory, it was a different country, different rules, different nationality laws that excluded me. And I've lived in the United States without status ever since. And statelessness means no rights, no legal identity, no future you can build. And even in isolation, I've found something powerful, and that's that I'm not alone, and that there's a movement that we are building around United Stateless. But it's so important to first define what is a stateless person. A stateless person is one who is not considered as a national by any state under the operation of its law. This is a framework. This is a definition that matters. When we are using the word stateless, this is a definition we need to use and uphold. Because when we start to dilute the meaning by expanding this definition to describe a person that is not this, then we dilute the meaning and dilute the experience of what people like me have lived through. And not having citizenship means you don't have access to the things that citizenship gives you. Citizenship is a connection between you and a country or a state. And that country, that connection comes from a birth certificate. Sometimes it can come from naturalization as well. Sometimes countries can give citizenship to people, mostly celebrities and soccer players, but those are three ways that a country can recognize you. And citizenship gives you access to rights, and you're given that access to rights through a social security number, through a birth certificate, legal identity. And with that legal identity, you have opportunities for civic engagement, holding public office, work, higher education, travel, marriage, financial access. You also have an obligation between you and a state. It's a mutual relationship between a person and laws and responsibilities. And in the United States, that's defined by the United States Constitution. And you also offered protection, consulates, embassies, state advocacy. And lastly, the sense citizenship and nationality gives a sense of belonging, right? Independence Day, Veterans Day, Memorial Day. These are traditions that are national, but we also know that there's regional and local traditions that we're part of. And statelessness also means not having, so when you don't have that, you don't have a country that recognizes you, you're unable to get a passport, you have no right to return home, you don't have a protection from any government, and there's over 218,000 people in the United States alone that meet this definition or are at risk of being stateless. Statelessness is the absence of legal identity and protections. Earlier, I was asked about finishing school, what I wanted to be in high school. And in the United States, when I was growing up in the suburbs of Philadelphia, I was fortunate to be able to register to school because I didn't have any public school. There were no barriers to me being able to enter a public school and be registered and have accredited high school diploma. My experience started to really falter when I became 18 and there was no path for me in my DMV or the Department of Motor Vehicles to get some form of ID or even be able to get a driver's license. And that presented so many barriers even after I finished 1 year of Villanova University. I just couldn't continue to go to school. And this was around the 2008 crash, and in many ways, maybe it avoided me a lot of different types of debt, but that decision was made for me. I didn't have the opportunity to go pursue higher education if I wanted to, which limited me in what I could do. Statelessness around the world is often preventable. It's a result of human decisions. And through exclusionary laws or forgotten paperwork, people are erased from legal existence. Conflicting and discriminatory nationality laws. There are 24 countries in the world where women are not given the full equal nationality right to be able to pass their nationality to their children. And that these 24 countries specifically only value a man's right and take away the woman's voice. So if your father's unknown or you're a product of violence, you are born without a country, without nationality. Wars, border disputes, and state succession. Soviet Union is one of the biggest state succession stories in the past, in our lifetime, all of our lifetimes. But even before that, there was a state succession of Yugoslavia. The border disputes that happened in Ethiopia and Eritrea. Wars between, Syria, they just have exploded and oftentimes displaced people. And hearing a lot of your introductions today, you work with a lot of displacement, people that have been forcibly removed from their homes, oftentimes because of natural disasters. That sometimes can aggravate or create even more challenges and barriers to someone that doesn't have a national identity. Migration and genocide are oftentimes causes of statelessness, or rather effect. Nazi Germany stripped their minority citizens, the citizens within Nazi Germany, of their citizenship before the precursor to atrocity crimes. This also happened during the Armenian genocide. It happened during the Cambodian genocide and also the Rohingya genocide. It's a way to strip someone's voice and ability to have their own agency, but most importantly, to be able to escape, or rather to be mobile and independent. Administrative obstacles. I like to point this out that in the United States, the United States has the most direct birth registration process in the entire world. It is a model. You are born in a hospital or birthing center, you are automatically registered there and then. No fees, no having to leave and go to another office. There's many communities in the world where they're living in rural, farm communities where they have to travel into the city to be able to register their child. There's oftentimes transportation issues. barriers to affording the fee, and also sometimes it's not a priority for a young family to do so. But unfortunately, that carries on with that child for the rest of their life. And lastly, climate change, which is a very new or growing, phenomenon. It's high seas rising. This is specifically affecting nations in the Pacific Ocean, where high seas rising are swallowing up their islands and leaving a whole community, a whole nation displaced. And it's still a topic of contention, mostly because where do you remove a whole country that doesn't physically exist anymore? But where do those people go? It oftentimes will create statelessness, oftentimes creates worsening situations that where people are already forced to displace, or displaces people already. And a child is born stateless every 10 minutes. This is a UNHCR study on this, and it's pretty alarming that it would only continue to increase in the world as we're seeing rise of authoritarianism. We're seeing a very shift in world dynamics and power. In the United States, upholds jus soli, which is a fancy Latin word meaning birthright citizenship of the soil. And this ensures, and this is protected in the 14th Amendment under the Constitution, it is anyone born on U.S. soil is automatically granted citizenship. It is the one preventable measure of creating statelessness in the United States. And the reason why we even have the 14th Amendment is because of post-Civil War, during the Reconstruction era, you have descendants and newly freed enslaved people, formerly enslaved people, being given rights but no citizenship. These enslaved people were the first stateless people in this country. They were people that didn't even have any sense of belonging to the country they were forcefully displaced from, but they had no sense of belonging to the country that they were enslaved into for multi-generations. And it's really to the advocates and stakeholders of that era that pushed for equal rights for those that were formerly enslaved that we really owe this to. It allowed, at the time, legal identity was not something that is as prevalent as it is now. Having an ID wasn't something that was important, or rather an area. But what it allowed it to do is for formerly enslaved people to be able to be seen by the law, protected by the law, have bank accounts, but also to be able to buy land, be able to buy businesses and open shop. That is so important. The 14th Amendment specifically excludes Indigenous communities in this country. It wasn't until 1925, years and years later, where leaders from the Osage tribe and others pushed for the Indian Citizenship Act that President Coolidge passed. I also want to point out in United States history, which is really, really interesting, that there was a time where American citizen women were stripped of their nationality if they married foreign-born men. This state by state ruling did not affect men marrying foreign-born women. It affected women, U.S. citizen women specifically. It wasn't until 1920, the Cable Act under Roosevelt, that undid that harm. So excluding nationality rights to people of minorities exists everywhere, but it also exists here. And the conversations around limiting access to birthright citizenship in the United States will absolutely create stateless people. And it's with absolute that I say that because we live in a world of 160 some countries. Every single one of those countries have their own nationality laws, how they recognize citizens, how they treat their citizens, but also what's called derivative parentage, how they allow citizens to be able to pass their nationality if they're living abroad. So who's to say migrants or immigrants in this country that are having children, who's to say that they even have a connection to their home country that their child could access if this country decides to limit access to birthright citizenship? And it's alarming. But right now, statelessness, the United States has very, very strong protective nationality laws that are under the Constitution, but statelessness still exists here. Majority of us are foreign born. We are about 218,000 estimate from over 30 different countries and territories around the world. There is no law defining or protecting stateless people in the United States. We have many in our community under ICE parole or supervision, unable to adjust, but yet unable to leave, kind of stuck in limbo. And it absolutely affects your mental health, access to employment, education, and enduring family separation. But this is not where the story ends. In 2017, I met 6 other stateless people in DC, and we just decided that we wanted to start United Stateless as a national organization with the mission to build community among those impacted by statelessness and to advocate for our human right to nationality. Nationality is a human right. Everyone born in this world deserves to belong to a country. And when you're stripped of that country, it limits your access to rights, mobilities, self-agency, and claim. And we believe that the United States can and should recognize people that don't have a nationality. Our work is specifically in the United States. We are the country's only organization addressing statelessness. We do this by running the country's only legal clinic to represent, refer, and close a knowledge gap among legal practitioners and law students around statelessness. We also lead on advocacy, and our advocacy pushes for legal permanent solutions for statelessness, which is through federal law. We also add our voice to the global stage on this issue. Statelessness exists everywhere. Anywhere that there's a country with borders, stateless people exist. And our goal is to unite with other advocates around the world to be able to share resources and helpful tips to how to navigate advocacy while also being able to run our programming. But most importantly, we put a lot of effort on community building. We are combine legal services with trauma-informed community care and advocacy because you can't separate one from the other. And we are turning trauma into reconstruction. And something that has come up through our community building and casting from the 7 that met in 2017 to casting our net wider and wider is that we've uncovered a trend of unregistered Americans. These are children that were born in the United States on US soil whose parent and or guardian chose not to register their births. And these people are born in oftentimes rural or conservative communities. They're not given the right to be able to claim their birth registration, but as adults, it becomes really complex, as oftentimes there is no eyewitness or there is no record or paper trail to prove that this person has an identity. And among all 50 states, every state deals with delayed birth registration differently, requires different proof, and it is a growing area that we're putting a lot of resources and energy into to come up with what is the best solution that can address the issue that unregistered Americans are experiencing. And international humanitarian law was built to protect human dignity, but it wasn't citizenship status. And when we extend that lens to statelessness, we see a moral and legal imperative to act. The challenge ahead is not simple, is simple, but is profoundly challenging to make something universal when it is so unknown. So I'm really grateful to have shared this with you all. In the United States, we're advocating for legal permanent solutions, and that is through the Stateless Protection Act, which it simply will create the definition, a legal using the international definition I addressed earlier. It would create the definition and a process for people to apply for stateless status and then be able to then apply for green card or lawful permanent residency to then be eligible to one day naturalize. It is so specific. I also just wanted to raise, sometimes I get asked, like all these minutia details, to be a stateless person isn't losing your passport, isn't forgetting it, or, it is literally a country says, we don't know you, we cannot offer you anything. And it is a very specific experience and definition, and it's not something that we take lightly. We rely on humanitarian law and examples internationally to be able to guide our work here. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Karina. As I suspected, you've set the bar impossibly high, and I just thank you for the heartfelt knowledge and passion that you pour into this topic every single day. So I want to thank Jill and her entire team and the staff and volunteers that she works with each and every day for hosting this great forum for this kind of discussion. This topic does not get nearly enough attention. It's often eclipsed by larger topics within the IHL sphere, but nevertheless, as we sit here today, as Karina laid out, the business of or the importance of how international humanitarian law in particular handles people, to include stateless people, is more relevant than ever. Look no further than the Ukraine conflict to see the kinds of massive effects that an armed conflict at scale can have on a population. Populations move for all sorts of reasons. Armed conflict is one heck of a cattle prod to move populations involuntarily, both internally displacing people and externally displacing people. And so that's not the only conflict that where this sort of thing is occurring, but there's nothing on its scale currently in terms of international armed conflicts. So it's a great example why this remains perpetually prescient, but especially as we navigate our daily lives, it's particularly relevant now. I'll give just a quick background, and I'll duck in and out of this this slide deck. So Jill gave a really gracious introduction for me, and I really appreciate the chance to come and speak to you all here today. So if you haven't interacted with me before, I'm senior counsel for IHL at the headquarters level. In that capacity, I help lead our IHL dissemination program nationally and then overseas in SAF's operation at military bases overseas. Jill, you were correct. I have a military background. I'm still a judge advocate, so somebody kindly put an explainer into the chat. That's just a military lawyer. I happen to be affiliated with the Army. My entire adult life has been spent in uniform, so I enlisted at 17, so I needed my parents to sign the contract, so that's a fun walk through history when I go back and pull that paperwork, because my mom's very angry signature is on the dotted line, as it were. But I originally enlisted in the Army Reserve and then served in the Army.
Can I ask you a question before you
sure.
start? Did you think when you were 15 that you were going to be military? Did you think when you were in high school you were going to be military, or is this another? Would you
maybe
ever
at
see
the
yourself
end
in the job you have now?
No. Maybe at the end of high school, when I was slightly, and by slightly I mean like a half a percentage point more mature than I was at the beginning. At the beginning, and I'll circle back to this nerdery momentarily, but no, I thought if you consider a Jedi from Star Wars to be military, then sure, like, that was my dream, just become a Jedi, and that's a career you can have. No, I had no aspirations for the military. I'm not from a military family. My family are all public school teachers, so I didn't really have any kind of formulative vision. At some point, I was doing the junior ROTC program, and which is sort of a pseudo military program, citizenship program. And at some point, I made up my mind that I wanted to serve out of a desire to give back and sort of repay this debt that I felt I owed for the privileges that I had as a citizen. That's now set in stark comparison to, or stark contrast to the experience that Karina graciously shared. But that was my motivation. Everything else sort of fell into place after that. I wish I was a person with a plan. Mostly I'm a person that really likes movies and things and gets inspired by things that I see on TV and the big screen. So despite that like lack of cohesive glue to my life plan, I've been very fortunate to end up where I am. But I served for a while as an enlisted soldier in the reserves. I was doing Army ROTC in college, and then was lucky enough, the Army gave me a delay in my active duty service to go to law school. So I went to law school in North Carolina, and then came on to active duty uh, pretty soon after passing the bar, and came in as a judge advocate. And so I served 7 years on active duty, did a variety of things, criminal laws, prosecutor and defense attorney, but really I cut my teeth as a young officer um, doing what we call operational law, what the Army calls operational law or national security law. It envelops IHL. We call it the law of armed conflict, but they're synonyms. And a formative experience of mine was my deployment to Afghanistan, where I advised on combat operations during Operation Enduring Freedom. I did some private practice for a little bit after transitioning off active duty and into the reserves, and then I've been in this role for about 5 years. I still serve as a judge advocate in the Army Reserve. Right now, I specialize in space operations and space law. And so I belong to the Army's Space and Missile Defense Command out of Peterson Space Force Base. So I did not ever anticipate that being an Army officer would include, well, I didn't anticipate we'd have a Space Force, but I didn't anticipate that I would serve on a Space Force base. But given my Star Wars fandom, it's very appropriate. Just for reference, if you're familiar with Afghanistan, I served down south in Kandahar province, the home of the Taliban, as it were, where they originated. This is before we handed off combat operations to Afghan forces, so it was a pretty, as we call it, kinetic environment. So lots going on from a legal perspective. But I got to see IHL in action. I got to advise on IHL in a dynamic moment, being 27, 28 years old, a brand new attorney, very much a young adult, along with that, and being asked to or expected to provide sound legal advice to combat operations. That'll mature you pretty quickly. So that was a formative experience. More importantly, I like Harrison Ford. I like him as Han Solo. I like him as Indiana Jones. I like him when he's the Jack Ryan with the CIA or the president. But really, what you need to know is I'm a big Harrison Ford fan. It will be I don't want to discuss. He's getting old, but he's going to live eternally. So I'm going to stop sharing but I'll come back to this deck in a minute and get down to the business of statelessness and IHL. It's important to note that Karina, I think, did a really eloquent job of illustrating one of the core problems with statelessness faced by those that have that status, which is this gap that they often fall in, this gap in legal protections, this gap in access to certain things that you need to just move about your life, things that normal folks that have not dealt with that status, we take for granted. The ability to walk into a bank and open an account, the ability to go to school without questions being asked, the ability to interact with law enforcement authorities or without fear, that sort of thing. All these things that are just sort of natural functions of your life as a citizen. That's not the case for stateless persons, and they're at a special risk, at an especially high risk when it comes to armed conflict. And that's for a variety of reasons that I'll touch on. Karina gave a great definition of stateless persons, and I would note that stateless persons are not defined in IHL. You're not going to find a provision in the Geneva Conventions that precisely defines that. What IHL does deal with is certain statuses for civilians that may or may not have a connection point based on their nationality, or protections that are in place regardless of one's nationality, or protections that are designed to be there in spite of one's nationality or lack thereof. So I appreciate the sharing of the UNHCR definition and in the chat there. But the bottom line to understand is that a stateless person, while they fall into many legal gaps, for purposes of IHL, they're considered civilians. That may seem like common sense, but it's really critical because in many conflicts, a person can, by no fault of their own, by no intent of their own, become stateless. You can have conflicts in which nations are created, states are created. You can have conflicts in which states are wiped off the map, or a person for some reason, fleeing oppression, becoming a refugee and losing that legal connection point, or that nationality, becomes stateless. The Yugoslavia wars of the early 1990s are a great example of this, and the sort of the spontaneous creation of countries during that conflict are a good example of the complexities that can layer in here. But I come back to that foundational principle. They are civilians because that is the critical center point. It doesn't matter what other sort of legal gaps that these individuals fall into. They do not lose that status as a civilian. That civilian status is not anchored to nationality. It's not anchored to ethnicity. It is anchored to their non-participation in the conflict as a combatant. So IHL broadly defines civilians as those who are not taking direct part in hostilities, those who are not combatants. It's a definition in the negative, but it applies to stateless persons. So just like any other civilian on the battlefield, so long as an individual does not take direct part in hostilities, picking up a weapon and firing it, taking some part, joining an organized armed group, something like that, they're going to retain that status. They're also entitled to the basic presumption then that if there is any doubt about their status, so say they're operating, they're living or moving through an area that is facing intense combat. So think about in 2022 in eastern Ukraine, Mariupol, a city in eastern Ukraine that was encircled by Russian forces. People were trying to flee, others were staying and trying to survive the siege, as it were. Obviously, questions could arise as to who these individuals were moving about. Are they Ukrainian soldiers or insurgents trying to escape and maneuver on Russian forces? Who are these individuals? Well, for stateless persons, like any other civilians, when that kind of doubt exists, the presumption is there to answer the question of what should I do? And it is presumed that they are civilians until their actions, their conduct, or maybe their membership in some organization proves otherwise. That's critical because those individuals, like all civilians, enjoy the same baseline general protections affected to all civilians, regardless of their nationality, ethnicity, etc. That includes the prohibition against directly targeting them. So think about the IHL principle of distinction, if you're familiar with that, this idea that when a party uses force, they have to distinguish in using that force between legitimate military targets and civilian targets. That protection extends to civilian objects, so the property of a stateless person, their home, their personal possessions, maybe their vehicle, something like that. Those are similarly protected, and by extension. And then, although they can't be directly targeted, stateless persons, much like civilians more broadly in combat zones, often come into harm's way. They may be in and around fighting and subjected to what is otherwise a lawful attack. So say a military headquarters is being targeted and it's in the middle of an urban environment. Well, naturally, they're going to be civilians. Stateless individuals, like other civilians, are not completely protected in that circumstance. IHL allows for collateral damage. It does allow for some measure of death and suffering, but one of the other fundamental principles that of proportionality would apply. And so a party using the force in which civilian casualties are going to be expected has to weigh those expected civilian casualties or damage to civilian property against the concrete military advantage that's going to be gained. And they have to weigh that even if the civilians in question are stateless. They can't look at it and say, well, these folks have no home. They have no country to which they have a legal relationship. So we don't have to. We get to shortcut around that principle. No, that's not the answer. The answer is that they are treated the same as all civilians. And then lastly, on that front, they share the same fundamental guarantees of protection that all civilians have by virtue of IHL, both stemming from the Geneva Conventions and from what we call customary international law. So this body of law that isn't written down in an international treaty. Countries didn't sit down and ink customary law. It stems from the repeated practices and observations of states. So through conflict after conflict after conflict, if a country does or refrains from doing something enough, that repeated practice can develop into a custom. Those customs form customary international law. That body is a part of IHL, and it has the same equal weight of law as does any international treaty. So you wouldn't treat CIL any differently than, say, the Geneva Conventions. But those fundamental guarantees are really critical. They include things like humane treatment that is applied without regard to national origin or citizenship. These include critical protections like not allowing torture, not allowing degrading treatment, not allowing collective punishment, hostage taking, slavery, etc. The list goes on. Those basic guarantees are really critical, and it's an important and I think a really laudable aspect of IHL that it has developed in a way, both in treaty and in custom, that those protections are applied without regard to nationality. There is a component of IHL that does bring into question nationality, and that is civilians can qualify in some armed conflicts, namely international armed conflicts. So think country versus country. Ukraine versus Russia is the current great example. There's a status that's available in international armed conflicts known as protected persons. A protected person, that's a formal legal status, and it stems from the Fourth Geneva Convention. So GC4 came into being post-World War II, 1949, and GC4 was unheard of. There was no corollary to GC4, which is entirely or it hinges entirely around protections for civilians. GC4 didn't exist before. That's very much unlike, say, the First Geneva Convention, so protection of the wounded and sick in the field. That traces roots all the way back to the very first Geneva Convention of 1864, right? That had a pathway. GC3, prisoners of war, that had precursors in the law. GC4 did not. GC4 sprang up from the horrors that civilians faced out of World War II across all theaters, and the international community, the drafters, felt that it was critical that a convention a treaty be drafted specifically to concern civilians and provide added protections. Now, protected person, that status which is found in GC4, that gives an additional several layers of protections for those civilians beyond the fundamental guarantees, beyond those basic fundamental principle type protections of distinction and that stuff. And some of them are very critical. If you were to crack open GC4, you're going to see 3 parts to that convention. Part 2, I would say, is a carve out. Part 2 is a set of protections that cover populations in conflict zones that have no distinction, no trigger point based on nationality. So these are general protections, things like protections for the wounded and sick, hospital staff, providing for evacuation from besieged areas. So these blanket protections. Part 3 is where GC4 carves out the grounds for protected persons, and Part 3 is subdivided into 4 sections that really outline some critical areas of protections. That includes protections for aliens who are in the territory of a party to the conflict, occupied territories, which is one of the seminal aspects of GC4, and then internees, those who are detained, but they're not prisoners of war, people who are wrapped up for some reason and imprisoned in the conflict. And if you just spend 5 minutes perusing Part 3, the protected persons portion, you can immediately see how valuable these additional protections are. Things like special protections for women against sexual violence. It specifically mentions rape, enforced prostitution, and indecent assault. Guaranteed access to either both the ICRC or the Red Cross movement, and or protecting powers. Protecting powers, I won't dive down that rabbit hole, but protecting powers just being designated neutral countries that aren't part of the war, the conflict, whose job it is to help ensure that IHL is respected. Things like the right to leave the territory. Within the bounds of occupied territories, one of the single biggest protections that GC4 carves out is that the protection against forcible relocation. So the business of forcibly moving a population out of an area or around within an area, that is specifically prohibited. And that's a concern that remains prevalent. I would point you to the ICC's, the International Criminal Court's indictment of President Putin of Russia as a good example of the seriousness of which this provision is taken. So that indictment pertains directly to the alleged forcible transfer of Ukrainian citizens, in this case children, out of occupied territories in eastern Ukraine. So this is a section that is emblematic of all of this portion of GC4, which is it's a set of protections that you want to apply to you if you're in this situation. You can imagine as an individual caught in the middle of an armed conflict, the heightened dangers that you might face, particularly if you're stateless. And I'll highlight, maybe a refugee. Now, refugees aren't stateless by definition, but you can be a refugee and stateless at the same time. So I would go back to the Yugoslavia wars, and in an instance where the country with which you attributed your citizenship no longer exists by whatever means. It's destroyed, it's disbanded, it's dismantled legally, it no longer is recognized, etc. You have fled as part of the conflict. You fled, for whatever the reasons may be. You're a refugee, and suddenly you're stateless because your country no longer exists, and you've now found yourself in either enemy territory or you're in the hands of the enemy. You're at a checkpoint, you're detained, you're in a jail cell. And very quickly, the danger that you're facing can escalate if you are part of an ethnic minority that is being persecuted by one side of the armed conflict. If your origin point, your previous nationality is regarded as given enemy status by the party who's detaining you, all of those things can expose you to substantial danger. I mean, just basically think about a perturbed guard who has captured you, and he doesn't know you, but he knows you're his enemy, right? He's given you that status because you're of this nationality or you're of this ethnicity. Very quickly, you could be exposed to significant danger there. Retribution, revenge type actions, injury, death, etc. And so those are situations that drafters of GC4 recognized, and things that had actively happened during World War II, and gave all the more reason for making sure that those protections existed and then applied broadly. So GC4 sets the boundaries, and GC4 doesn't talk about, it doesn't mention statelessness, but it does talk in terms of nationality. And I apologize, my dog likes to longingly bark at chipmunks and squirrels out of our back door. So if she guest stars in this, I apologize. Read narrowly, you could look at GC4 and say, well, does it really apply to stateless persons? It talks about people who are nationals of a party to the armed conflict, that sort of thing. Does it contemplate those who are stateless? I would point you to what's known as Additional Protocol 1. So basically an additional treaty that layered on to the 4 original Geneva Conventions. AP1 came about in 1977 and really layered on additional protections for international armed conflicts. It refined in Article 73 of that convention the scope of this protected person status. And in no uncertain words, it says persons considered stateless or refugees, because you can be stateless and a refugee, but you can also be a refugee and retain your citizenship or nationality. They shall be protected persons with regard to parts 1 and 3 of the 4th Geneva Convention, part 3 being the protected persons portion we've been discussing. So it removed all doubt. And when you consider the issues pertaining to some of these protections that are going on, say in the Ukraine conflict, this is critical. And I would point out that both Russia and Ukraine are parties to AP1. Whether you're a party to that additional protocol is a critical question about whether it applies. But in the context of that conflict, it does. So that provided critical clarity to it. It removed that sort of question. And I would say the judicial side of IHL, so that being judicial cases stemming from prosecution of war crimes, they've also regarded these protections with a pretty broad scope. So there's a case out of the International Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, the ICTY, known as the Tadic case. Tadic is a sort of a seminal case in international criminal law, and one that has had a profound effect on the interpretation of IHL. Understand that these cases, even the really seminal ones like Tadic, they are not law in and of themselves, but they are tremendously persuasive in their weight, and that in the years since a case like Tadic was handed down, that weight has been borne out in how states conduct themselves. So it hasn't, a case like Tadic doesn't go back and rewrite the Geneva Conventions or any other treaty, but it does provide a helpful analytical lens through which we can look at. And Tadic, as part of that case, it concerned allegations that from the defendant, that GC4 and the protections he was accused of breaching were not applicable because of the issue of because the individuals concerned, some of these victims, were stateless. And Tadic dismissed that. In fact, it reversed the acquittal that the original trial court had handed down, and it kind of disposed of this stateless argument with some really nice clarity. Judicial cases aren't always sort of nice and rational in their flow for the average person. This one was. It points out that whatever the classical view of armed conflict was, by the time of the Yugoslavia wars, things have changed, right? In modern conflicts, especially inter-ethnic conflicts like Yugoslavia was, new states are created, as I mentioned before. Ethnicity rather than nationality is often prioritized, and so Tadic hones in on this idea of an allegiance, and it says the court there said nationality is just not adequate to define who is and isn't a protected person under GC4. It's just too narrow a construct, and so it disposed of that, and it applied in its persuasive fashion, I think has influenced application to say that nationality is not the end all be all. That is not the trigger point for determining whether one is a protected person. And so the court, by disposing of that argument, said, well, it didn't matter. Your argument that these persons were stateless and therefore GC4 didn't apply, that's a bunk argument. It did apply. I won't go into the nuances of their analysis of one's allegiance to one party or another. But the bottom line out of that case was, I thought, pretty profound, and it went back to the original purposes of the Geneva Conventions, and in particular, GC4. And they reminded the reader that the core purpose of GC4 in particular was to provide maximal protection to civilians. And with that spirit in mind, the business of trying to artificially narrow its scope by applying some trigger point, like a light switch, like nationality, to say, well, if you don't meet this technical bar, then you don't get these extra protections. That doesn't make any sense. It ran contrary to the spirit of the conventions themselves, in this idea that we should apply them broadly for purposes of reducing suffering. And judicial cases aren't always written well and in a way that I think makes the case to the average person, but that I thought I could not put it any better than that. I wanted to share because sometimes these concepts can get abstracted to the point of being useless when you're talking about legal terms. But I promised that I would bring back my nerdery, and Jill, I said I didn't have any slides. I lied. I do have slides, and they're Star Wars related. But a sort of a classical example of statelessness, if you're trying to apply this, and I apologize for anyone who's never seen Star Wars, I'm now dragging you into the galaxy far, far away against your will, perhaps. But there's a very classical case of statelessness and the impacts, an illustration of everything that we've been talking about right there in the original movie. You don't need to venture into the prequels or the more modern movies. It's right there in the original 1977 film, A New Hope. And it is none other than perhaps one of the most famous characters in the story, Princess Leia. If you've never thought about Princess Leia, now you will always think of her, I hope, as a classical example of a stateless person under IHL and more broadly with regard to sort of the problems that stateless folks face. So Princess Leia is famously from a planet Alderaan, very wealthy planet. She's from the ruling family there. And Alderaan meets a terrible fate. The Empire brings its big super weapon, the Death Star, into orbit over Alderaan. And in a show of force designed to scare the galaxy into submission, it destroys this peaceful planet using the battle station's big gun and instantly wipes out everybody on the planet. The planet's reduced to an asteroid field. But not everyone on the planet, not every Alderaanian was killed. Not every Alderaanian was on the planet at the time. And chief among those individuals was Princess Leia, who was not on planet and survived she had to witness the destruction of her own planet. But also, thousands of Alderaan citizens were scattered around the galaxy. They were, expats. They were doing, traveling, whatever they may have done, just like normal people in our world. They were not present on Alderaan when the destruction happened, and they survived. Their country, by extension, the planet, Star Wars kind of treats entire planets as countries, it's wiped out in an instant. This is the classical case of a country that collapses in on itself during an armed conflict or ceases to exist. Alderaan is no more within the first 45 minutes of A New Hope. what does that mean for the individuals like Princess Leia and her other citizens, or former citizens of Alderaan? Well, for Princess Leia, she immediately shows you the dangers that a stateless person faces. She's imprisoned by the Galactic Empire aboard their battle station. She faces interrogation and torture at the hands of, ironically, her own dad aboard that same battle station. And she is hunted after she escapes that battle station. She is hunted and targeted for assassination, and is a target. Her life is at risk for the rest of the war, throughout the rest of the original trilogy. She's got a gigantic bullseye. It remains one of the biggest targets. And also, I lied when I said you could only watch the original movie. This is just a bit of context. But also, normal Alderaanian citizens, her counterparts, they faced similar fates. They may have had nothing to do with the war between the Galactic Empire, the big bad guys, and the Rebel Alliance. But the fact that they were Alderaan citizens, the Empire was out hunting them down in an effort to wipe out that entire population. They were persecuting them in because of their former citizenship, but arguably because they're just a vestige of this terrible act. They want to wipe them off the face of the galaxy. So they face a terrible fate. And these are people that are just going about their daily business. Their business, they're trying to go to work, raise families, just live their lives in the galaxy and stay out of the conflict. And yet that statelessness makes them a target and puts them at increased danger because they can't go home. There is no safe refuge for them. There is no haven that's afforded to them. They don't get to be picked up by another planet and made citizens of those planets. Suddenly, they're both refugees and stateless persons who have a target on their back. And so I present this not to like microanalyze this nerdy thing that I'm that I've like have my life revolve around in some aspects, but to show you that this is a classical case that really clearly illustrates the kind of dangers that an individual can face that are exacerbated when they lose that citizenship. Leia was fortunate because her status, her wealth, all of these aspects of her upbringing, those provided a bubble to her. She was also a leader in the Rebel Alliance, and so she, in many ways, was safeguarded. That wasn't the case for a lot of her Alderaanian counterparts. And so it's GC4 and broad application of principles like that, broad application of IHL and its protection to civilians without regard to citizenship or nationality that are so critical. And so I thank you for indulging me on a little detour into the Star Wars galaxy. Thank you, Jill, for having me. And Karina, thank you again for the fantastic presentation from your side. I learned a lot.
I have a couple of questions or comments before I open it up to questions for Karina and for Thomas. I understand there's letters of detestation. And one of the things that I knew from the International Committee of Red Cross is, for instance, that when I worked in the refugee camps, that when people had lost, the refugees had lost their papers and had no IDs because they had to run, or their houses were burned and all their papers were gone and they had no proof that they were citizens of another country. If they had registered in a refugee camp and been registered by the ICRC as a civilian, that they could then bring that paper from the ICRC to whatever country they allied in to be able to test that they indeed were a citizen of a country, but were refugees due to an armed conflict. Can you address that?
Sorry, what aspect of it did you want me to address? I'm sorry.
Well, I just think that one of the ways that people can get IDs that don't have them, that are stateless, is if they have been in a refugee camp and were registered by an international committee member as a part of that refugee camp, that can be proof of that they have citizenship of a certain country. Is that true?
Yeah, so they do issue, and I will confess I am not an expert on their processes and procedures for this, but they do issue some degree of emergency travel documents for purposes of ensuring access to humanitarian assistance, and that's
maybe that's a question we can answer next week when we send the follow-up letter.
sure.
I can do a little bit more research, but I worked in a refugee camp, and the ICRC registered almost everybody in that camp so that they would have papers saying that they were refugees of certain countries.
And it is critical if you think about some of the ICRC's core functions in a conflict zone, not the least of which is accounting for persons, being able to account for persons who are detained or persons who may be separated from family members, being able to offer a measure of identity, for lack of a better word, is critical to that. How do you trace someone? How do you help family members connect back to an individual or account for someone's status if they lack those basic identification pieces that you mentioned? And so it's almost an absolute necessity that sort of function exists. I mean, otherwise, it would leave some big gaps in one of their ability to perform one of their core functions.
Got it. Thank you, Thomas.
Mm-hmm.
And then Karina, does anybody have any questions for Karina? This is a time to raise your hand or get off mute and express any questions you may have. Sandy, go for it.
Hi, and you talking about being stateless. Are you married?
Yes, I am married to a U.S. citizen. Unfortunately, when we got married in 2013, am I frozen?
No, we can hear you. We're just listening real close.
When I got married in 2013, I actually had to go to the state of Maryland to get married because Maryland state does not have a requirement of having a government issued ID to get married. So we could not adjust my status through my husband's right as an American, because that's the way the law is interpreting. A U.S. citizen has the right to pass nationality to their spouse and or children. I couldn't do that because of what's called consular processing. I came to this country when I was a minor under a whole different president. I came here even before ICE was created, before 9/11. And unfortunately, the way I entered became a law that changed under Bush II. He changed the law around I-130, or the marriage-based visa, that required me to go back to the country I entered from to then apply for my marriage visa and then be allowed to re-enter. But I didn't have a passport. I was on final removal order to be deported, so it became very complicated. I say this because my husband and I were dating for 5 years, and we realized that we wanted to get married. And when we got married in 2013, it started our 10-year journey of navigating Homeland Security, Department of Homeland Security, or DHS, to ask for permission. Basically, I needed to join a motion to reopen my case. It's been dormant for 20 years, and we needed the lawyers at the sub-agency ICE, or OPLA. It's like the lawyers there, rather. And we needed them to agree to join this motion to reopen, which it took some advocacy and push, and they agreed. And then that application was sent over to the Board of Immigration Appeals, which sits under the Judiciary Committee. And the Board of Immigration Appeals reopened my case, saw ICE's recommendation, and they separated myself from my family's case. And then with the new evidence of being stateless was included, this is why I couldn't adjust. This is a U.S. citizen. It's his right to pass his nationality. The argument is a strong argument, and they agreed. And we then actually, without approval, we then had to ask for the opportunity to adjust my status in the United States without having to leave. And we actually took on it's actually within military law. It's parole in place, which was actually given to, it was a Obama era provision or policy that allowed mixed, if very similar circumstances as my husband and I, but for military folk, to be able to apply and give the spouse the opportunity to adjust status in the United States without having to leave. And we did that, and we got approved. And it is with like so grateful that next year I get to have the opportunity to start my naturalization process to become an American. But I'm lucky, similar to Princess Leia. I'm very lucky. I had access, I had resources, I had a support of a spouse that had full rights, and I was able to navigate with my privilege my case that took majority of our time, of our marriage. And that's my purpose with United Stateless. I agree. I really enjoyed listening to Thomas talk about international law and also your perspectives as a military person and working in some of these high conflict zones. Statelessness was created after the United States left Afghanistan and the degradation of women's right there. But I believe that in order to really reach full human rights or social justice issues, it has to go directly from those impacted, and it has to be grassroots work within the countries that make it possible to adjust and give us the opportunity to be closer to the full rights that everyone deserves. I really believe that. I think we see a lot of examples in United States American history, primarily the American Disabilities Act, that allowed for greater access to those with disabilities. And that movement was those impacted with other stakeholders that pushed for equal rights. And I think that is a pillar to what we should strive for.
Thank you.
Thank
I think
you,
it's
Karina.
very important because what you're saying is so many people think it's simple and they go, well, why don't they just do this? Like real flippant, and they don't realize how many years and how much courts and how much all this stuff you have to do what seems should be simple. Thank you very much for sharing it with us.
Clay, would you, we have another hand raised. Clay, go for it.
Yeah, so my question's more on kind of some a case here in the U.S. with the current administration looking at examining and looking at accelerating and trying to push for more denaturalization, which I do understand requires a civil court in order to denaturalize somebody. But what happens if the civil court actually states that their U.S. citizenship is not valid, but they came from a country like China that doesn't recognize dual citizenship, and that person has given up their citizenship in China in order to become an American citizenship?
That is such a good question. And we actually have several, so because we operate a legal clinic, we have several cases that were affected by the current administration's push on denaturalization cases. And some of these cases are just like clerical name errors, or it's just bizarre. One of our cases is this young man who was in active duty in South Korea. He's younger. He's like 24 years old. And I'll dig up his story and post it in the chat. He was born of diplomatic parents from Niger in New York City. And he was born in a hospital, given a birth certificate, for all intents and purposes, he grew up thinking he's an American citizen. As a child, his family relocated back to Niger, but he returned again to go to college and eventually enlist in the army. He was in South Korea waiting to renew his passport when he was a victim of this push for denaturalization cases, where he was given sorry, we don't recognize you as a citizen. We're going to like honorably discharge you and then send you back to Houston and put you into ICE detention. Right. Like he had access to an attorney. She's based in Alaska. She's a prominent immigration attorney among military families and in that area of law. And she was able to really help him navigate his rights or to be able to have his citizenship reinstated. But to your point, Clay, which is a really good question, the biggest issue with statelessness is there's no protection. There's no law, and so it doesn't exist. Adjudicators or people in government making these decisions aren't really have any type of responsibility to address statelessness when it comes up. So with this administration, we are pushing for protection of our clients from detention. And what we have this one Supreme Court case that we are relying on. It was a decision called Zabidas that pretty much made it address the fact that when someone's in detention, it's not because they're in detention for impunitive services. They didn't break the law. They're in detention to be deported. And when a stateless person is in detention, they're in there for long periods of time. And Zabidas was back in the 90s. This guy was like in detention for like 4 years. And the government simply couldn't find a place for him to be deported to. And the Supreme Court case or decision resulted in, the government can hold you for 6 months before you're able to be released. So as an organization, what we've been really doing is ramping up habeas petitions to get people out of detention. The administration is without any type of due process. I think we've seen all these videos of people just being practically taken off the streets without being shown ID or being given a reason why they're being deported. And oftentimes they're taking people in detention that are not necessarily immigrants themselves. They're U.S. citizens. So it's really scary that there is no checks and balances, or rather your own personal rights are being violated. So I hope I answered your question. It's very complicated. I will post a story of the Houston man in the chat. And what we're hoping to is to raise awareness around this, be able to continue collecting evidence and resources to how statelessness happens and how it appears before United States law. I will also post our referral link. If you're out in the field, and I know I only can assume what everyone does. It sounds like everyone does a lot of different things that's in this call. But if you come into anyone in contact that simply can't answer the question, do you have a birth certificate? Do you have an ID? Do you know where you were born? We live in a country with a lot of diversity. And if anyone comes up that you think may be stateless or has questions, I encourage you to please refer them to our legal clinic. And I'll post that in the chat. I am very long-winded, so I really appreciate your patience with me.
You're not at all long-winded. You're not. No. You're very helpful because people don't know. And there's one question in the chat, Thomas, for you, asking, is there any conflict of interest between your JAG work and your IHL work at national headquarters? It's halfway through the chat. It was done probably.
Oh, thanks for that.
Yeah.
Ukraine is fascinating, both because people are always asking me, what's sort of cutting edge, what's the most pressing aspect of IHL, and Ukraine has made all the old new again. So all these sort of fundamental concepts of IHL, these international armed conflict related provisions that for a number of years, for decades, in fact, had sort of gone by the wayside because it's been a long time since we've had an IAC of any scale, are now fresh again. And it's been a good reminder of how important those fundamentals are, because you just never know. You speak to a Ukrainian and it becomes real very, very quickly. And to hear their description of going from daily life, even one in which conflict has been going on since 2014 in parts of the country, but if you didn't live anywhere near that, or you're not affected in your day-to-day life suddenly changed very quickly in February of 2022. And that kind of snap made a lot of folks realize, just normal citizens, we don't know anything about IHL. Made the government realize that we don't have a widespread understanding or dissemination of IHL, and so that's rapidly changed in the country there. So that fascinates me. But they're also redefining conflict in many ways. The aspects of drone warfare in particular are absolutely fascinating. Not necessarily things that redefine or call for creation of new rules, but these rules that we've sort of classically built around humans fighting one another suddenly need to be re-examined and reanalyzed when it comes to the involvement of a drone, even a drone controlled by a person. So somebody's surrendering to a drone, or a drone is dropping medical equipment, or it's the issues are limitless, and so it's been a constantly evolving conflict that provides some great opportunities for introspection on various aspects.
Are you able to hear me, Thomas?
I am.
There was a question in the chat about, is there any conflict of interest for you between JAG, working JAG still, and being head of international humanitarian law at national headquarters, since we're a neutral, impartial organization?
Oh, that's what I was trying to answer, the Ukraine conflict. So hopefully folks were able to hear my answer.
Oh, I thought it was, they were specifically at you. They were asking you specifically. Maybe
Yeah. No, personally, that's those are the reasons why I find it interesting, but that's the conflict that, and it's not that I find any other conflict less interesting or not interesting, but it's, when you have an international armed conflict at scale that's the first since World War II, largest since World War II, it has sort of special aspects to it. You just don't see two countries fight like this, thankfully, in a long time, and hopefully we won't make a habit of this. So
wonderful. And the other thing that suddenly happened to me is I can't see the chat. So there may be some other questions in the chat. And if either of you could look at the chat and answer them, that would be wonderful, because I can't see them.
To Sandy, considering seeing that you come across people that are stateless or appear to be, please share resources, the legal clinic. I'll make the referral link. We have a full-time staff attorney and a consultant attorney that work with us to manage our legal clinic. We also work with Center for Victims of Torture to provide trauma-informed approaches to this work. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
I'm going to take down your information. I'm a regional program lead for special kind of casework. So thank you for that info.
Other questions people may have? This has been most amazing. And I wonder, Karina, if you would share, I don't know if you can share it in the chat or you can share it another time, the wonderful one on the stateless is a beautiful video you sent me.
Oh, yes. Citizens of Nowhere.
If you can, Citizens to Nowhere. I love it. I've seen it 2 or 3 times and sent it off to people. If you could put that in the chat so people would have it, and I'll send it out to the people who weren't able to attend next week when we get the YouTube recording of today as well.
Good. Thank you.
Sure. And any last minute things you want to say, Thomas or Karina, that you think are really important to mention before we finish today?
Karina, after you.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to me talk and listen to this important conversation. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, I would echo that sentiment. And Karina, thanks for so gracefully sharing all of your knowledge and insight. I certainly learned something here. And don't be a stranger to our IHL programming, either at the regional level with great stuff like Jill helping host, or at the national level either. And please don't hesitate to reach out to either of us. Our emails are back to back there at the end of the chat if you have any questions or want to discuss further. Thanks for coming.
And I want to thank each and every one of you, because I know you're in different time zones, and some of you it's 8 o'clock at night and it's way past your bedtime or past your dinner. Appreciate it. And for those of you who are here early, I know you're rushing off to get off of work or go off somewhere else. I just want to thank you for being here. And I'll put my, oh, I can't put my email in the chat, but if you reach Thomas Harper, he can always reach me and give you my email if you need it. Any other last minute questions before we get off? Please raise your hand or get off mute. Anything else you wanted to say? Wow, we did 3:30. We kept on going. I can't believe it. This is wonderful. Thank you and goodbye, everyone. And if Karina and Thomas, you want to stay on for a couple of minutes, and feel free to do that if you can, or if you have to go, I totally understand it.
I have to
Thank
duck
you,
off to
guys.
help. Oh, thank you. I
Yeah.
gotta duck off to help with dad duties now, so pray for
Bye,
me.
Thomas. It was good to meet you too.
Yeah, it's good to meet you too. I wish the
Thank you,
Geneva
Jill.
Conventions applied to my kids when the way they treat me, but unfortunately, my human dignity is about to be sacrificed. Take care, everyone. Thanks for coming. Thanks for having us, Jill.
Sure, you're so welcome. Thank you for being here. It's a
Take care.
joy.
Bye.
Yeah, it's an absolute joy. Goodbye, everyone, and thank you for your support for being in this meeting today. Ramel, the meeting's over.